how I define a romantasy, and I think a lot of the industry would as well, is that without that, romantic plotline, the book would fall down. There wouldn't be a storyline. So in romantasy, the romance element is very core to it. Whereas with romantic fantasy, which I've written a lot in the past, is that there's a whole storyline and the romance is more of a subplot. And obviously we know that romance by definition means you have to have a happy ending.
Hi, I'm Jen and I run events for writers. I've had some small success in my own writing, but what I'd love is the big fish publishing contract with the literary agent that all writers dream about. And how best to find out about how to do that than to speak to the people who've experienced it themselves. This is the Prose and Pastries Podcast and I'm your host, Jen Flannery. Hi everyone and welcome to this month's Prose and Pastries. I'm absolutely delighted to have our next guest, Kerry Williams, author of the Darkness Duet. Hooray! Yay! Hi Kerry, lovely to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me, Jen. Always lovely to chat to you.
You too. So it's pancake day today. What's your go-to pancake topping?
Oh, I like a savoury pancake. I like a bit of laughing cow, like soft cheese in it. If it's a thin pancake, but in an American pancake, then I like a blueberry pancake.
We've met a couple of times before now. It's super exciting to have you also coming to our retreat day as well at Warwick Castle next month. I'm so excited for that, for our romantasy, fantasy, a whole breadth really of genre. And we managed to pop and have a little look at the castle the other week. What did you think of it?
Oh, it was absolutely stunning. I mean, I always think I'm so lucky to live with somewhere like Warwick Castle on my doorstep, which is just steeped in history. But when I saw the actual room that we were going to be in, it is just divine. Like the ceiling alone is just so inspirational, isn't it? So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that day.
I was asking lots of people on Instagram to send me through a few questions. One of the things that people always want to know is about your author's journey. Most people that I speak to have always wanted to write. Is that the same with you? Well, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so I have always wanted to write. It was definitely in my blood a little bit. I think my first instance of getting hooked on writing was when I was in year 4 at school, and I won like a little story competition, and my teacher made me write it up all nice and neat so they could go on their walls and stuff like that. So I've always been like really creative and always quite lost in my imagination. And I went to uni, I did creative writing at uni, so I studied it. And then for some reason after uni, I just stopped, and life got in the way, didn't write anything for years. And then I got back into writing when lockdown happened. So I was the same as everybody else, going a bit crazy. And I'd had this idea that was like rattling around in my head for years. And so, I had nothing but time on my hands. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to get it out, write it down, something to do, keep me occupied. Time, I think I was writing that for about a year. And I was like, I've got like 80,000 words on my hands here. That's like a whole book I've written. And I couldn't stop. I was then writing book 2. And so I was thinking at first, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just pop it onto KDP, just get it out there in the world. I was so green, so naive, didn't know anything about publishing. And so I started sending it around to a few agents, just thinking that the first person that I sent it to was going to be like, this is amazing, and I'd get an agent like that, and it just wasn't the case. So I went on this big journey with trying to get an agent, not getting an agent, and then signing with a tiny little press who were brand new, but learnt so much from them in terms of that you need to edit your book and all these things that I didn't even know when I first wrote my book. I was just writing from the heart. And so they published my trilogy, and unfortunately they closed their doors after a year. And then by that time I already had another book on my hands, which I had gone to a lot more awareness of how to write a book and story structure and all that wonderful stuff. So I tried to query again. Didn't get anywhere with that. My friend was with a new publisher called Hot Tree Publishing, and she was like, they are great, they're really creative, really collaborative, a lot more like marketing savvy, and so I submitted to them, unagented, because you could just send unagented submissions to them, and so they accepted it, and that was really wonderful. Met an absolutely incredible editor who just made my book really strong and learned so much from her. So it's just been such a learning curve, like always learning, always growing, and now I've got another book on my hands that I can actually say now, Jen, I know I told you before, I am now agented. I am officially allowed to say it. I've signed a contract with an agent, a bit of a dream agent as well. So I am so excited.
Oh, wow.
I've been working really hard on revisions for that book, and it's about to go on sub to traditional publishing houses.
Oh,
Which is
amazing.
amazing. So my journey's been long and had lots of ups and downs, but I think it just shows that it's, I think I said this to you before. I swear, writing, being an author, is a strange role, but I think 95% 5% of it is talent, 95% perseverance, and yeah, you just got to keep dreaming, basically.
Congratulations. Well, I wish I bought some like little champagne.
Oh yeah,
You
actually,
know?
there's no coffees.
Kind of known. Yeah. That's fantastic. So, how long were you querying for with this particular agent?
Not long at all. It happened really quickly, so I think it was a bit of a random story with how I got there, but it all happened very quickly. It all happened within like a week. So I submitted,
Oh, wow.
and then I heard back saying, yes, send over the full manuscript. And then within a week, I'd signed a contract with her. So
That is amazing. That's like
when
the
it
dream
happens,
scenario,
that's
isn't
why I
it?
haven't wanted to tell anyone or really announce it like very much, because when it happens, it all
Yeah.
just happens really quickly, and it's quite a strange feeling as well that I keep expecting like her to go, oh no, I've changed my mind. It's actually rubbish. So when your dreams come true, it's a some very strange feeling. Like, and it happens very
Yeah.
quickly, and like they're really blasé about it. It's like, oh yeah, I love this. Let's sign it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I've been looking for this. And I'm like, oh my god. Within a month, I'd gone from no agent to
Yeah.
now an agent almost on submission. So crazy,
That's
crazy.
crazy. And then, so have you had to do any revisions or edits in that?
Yeah, so that's where
Yeah.
the last month. So I spent about 4 weeks doing revisions. My top tip to people who are in that submission journey is don't be too married to it. And I know everyone like wants it to be so perfect, but they're going to have an editorial vision as well. And if you find the right agent, like I have, they work with you, and they, the suggestions that they'll be giving me, like, oh, I want more of this. Like in my current one, it's, let's amp up the yearning. And I'm like, yes, we love yearning. So we've worked on that, and pointed out good things like, why has this happened? And I'm like, I didn't know. I just thought it was cool. So it's made me think a bit more about like, the world building and this kind of stuff. So yeah, so lots of submissions, some complete changes. I didn't realise until I'd submitted it to her that one of my characters was very obviously based on Anthony Bridgerton. So we were like, we've got to change the
Okay.
name. He can't be called Anthony. um, So it was like, okay, we'll change the name. Yeah, so you'll submit what you think is a perfect version of your manuscript, but there will be changes to make. So yeah, I've been working really hard on those revisions.
That's really, really exciting. And then, so are you allowed to speak about what you're working on at the moment, or is that tightly under wraps at the minute?
I think I'm fine to say it. My pitch to her was, it's Romeo and Juliet meets The Little Mermaid, but what if the lovers became enemies? And so it's quite a clear hook. And I think over the years of pitching to agents, I've kind of got better at, making a hook, having some good comps. So it just made it, I know where it'd sit on the shelf, what books it'll sit next to, and having that strong hook as well, which I think like kind of lured her in. We were in a meeting with somebody else this week about a different project potentially, and they said the same. They was like, oh, so can I know what it is? And it's really, people get a good idea when you say Romeo and Juliet meets The Little Mermaid. You instantly know it's going to be some heart-wrenching romantasy going on.
Amazing. That sounds really exciting. That would be great to look out for.
Fingers crossed it goes well.
So I know that you refer to yourself as being a romantic fantasy author rather than just romantasy. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, there is actually. I think it comes down to reader expectations, and as I say, as I've learned and grown, it's kind of, those kind of things have become a bit more important, and how important it is to know what you're writing and who you're writing it for. So with this one, my latest novel, which is going on submission with my agent, that's a romantasy. And how I define a romantasy, and I think a lot of the industry would as well, is that without that, romantic plot line, the book would fall down. There wouldn't be a storyline. So in romantasy, the romance element is very core to it. Whereas with romantic fantasy, which I've written a lot in the past, is that there's a whole storyline and the romance is more of a subplot. And obviously we know that romance by definition means you have to have a happy ending. So, you read a promise there, is that's going to have a happy ending. Whether it's in book 1 or 5, 7, 8 books later, there's got to be a happy ending there. Otherwise, your romance readers aren't going to be happy if that doesn't have a happy ending or a happy finale. Otherwise, you'll just have to pitch it as fantasy if you want to have a nice tragic ending, which people are here for.
That's
we love
really
having our hearts broken, but we want to know. We want to know. We want to be prepared for that.
I think that's a really interesting point to make as well. Yeah, I would never have even thought that.
Really?
The idea that you couldn't class it as romantic unless it had a happy ending.
Yeah.
I always like the sad ending.
Yeah.
I love a bit of tragedy.
No, I love tragedy as well. But yeah, it have to be pitched as fantasy with a romantic element.
Yeah.
Or if you're not writing fantasy at all, you just wrote in a romance, it would then be classed as women's fiction, not as romance.
Yeah. So for people who are starting out and writing their first novel, whether it's romantasy or fantasy, have you got any tips that you would give them? What sort of things would you suggest to them about maybe world building or character development, something like that? What do you think they should kind of start with, really?
I probably don't have the best advice, because my advice is just to write it and then make it good later. I've never...
I still think that's really good advice, because I think that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, loads of people I know talk about either being a planner or a pantser, so I still think that's really good advice. So that sounds like you're more of a pantser than a planner.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. I guess when you think of it, but I guess I think because I'm very character driven, I have like little moments, and it's always when I'm like in the car and I'm driving, so I always know. I never know how it's exactly going to end, but I always know what's going to happen in the middle. So obviously, I'm sure many people have read Save the Cat or, that kind of thing, like your basic plot structures and that kind of thing. And there's always meant to be this big thing in the middle, which is, I don't know, a false victory or a false loss or something like that. But for me, the middle is a catastrophic emotional event where you're like, it's the point of no return. So, and I always have that in my head that's generally my motivation. That's what I'm getting towards. So I don't plan very much other than how I get from where they start to the middle. And I think I've always been quite naturally had kind of like a very character driven stories. There's always been like kind of a question. That premises come quite easy. It's like, who are they? What do they want and what's stopping them from getting there? So, all very like vital character kind of building things. But when you have like this big point in mind, I think it quite naturally flows that you're like, they want this, but this is what's going to happen in the middle, this big fallout that's going to cause all this drama, big catastrophic events. So, yeah, so I always think, I'm not the greatest with world building, because I am definitely, and this my latest novel has proven, it's like I write the thing, I love the characters are my main investment, and then I forget about the world building, so I have to go back in afterwards, after I've made it, and make it really beautiful afterwards, after I've got the skeleton. And that's quite a fun way of doing it, because I find whenever my first draft is really frantic, I'm just like getting everything out, and then the second is I go in and start like thinking about the world building and making everything look very beautiful and changing my words around, and I think sometimes that's a good way of doing it, because I don't feel like you can really know your story until you've written it, which sounds really counterproductive. But the more you write, the more you know, and then when you go back and do your second draft, it'll just become a lot easier.
How do you approach your second draft? So once you've got your bare bones, is it literally that you go back and you read the whole thing and then kind of start putting in the world building, or are there elements you focus on? Is there a kind of approach that you tend to have when you go back to it?
Yeah, so I think I do take it from start to finish in the second draft, because quite often when you work in that kind of chaotic way, and you are, I suppose, a bit more of a pantser than a plotter, when you finish your first draft and you've let it breathe for a little bit and you go back, generally when you go back and you read the first quarter of your book to second draft, you realise that first quarter needs some really major changes because there's things you put in there not quite of knowing your characters or how it's going to end up, and then you're like, oh, that doesn't work anymore, so you tweak all those kind of things. And yeah, I do take it chronologically, but I guess I don't know whether anyone else does this or whether this is weird. How I draft is that I draft everything in my Google Drive. Each folder, each chapter has a different document, so that when I've got it, I go back through it all chronologically. But then when I do things like submit it to an editor and they're like, oh, can we add in this? Can we change this bit? I don't have to read back through loads of it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's chapter 24, so I'll go back and change those bits there. So yeah, second draft is chronologically, and then after that it's just here and there, and then it does take me ages though because I don't have to submit it all again. I have to copy all the pages out. But that's just how my brain works best.
I love talking to authors about, everybody has their own way of doing things that I think it's really interesting.
Yeah,
just like the whole variety of different sort of ways of writing and
I don't think
habits and
the
things.
same.
When you are actually writing and working on something, do you write every single day? What's your routine like?
Yeah, I wish I wrote every day, but obviously I've got a job and 2 kids, and so that makes it quite tricky. And you know, after coming off the back of doing some really intensive revisions, like I had 4 weeks, a 4-week deadline to get them all done, and I made over 10,000. I added like 10,000 words into the manuscript and during the revisions, so that was really intense. So I have spent a good few days, probably a week, not writing anything, and I think I needed to like recharge those creative batteries. So I think I'll have like little bursts of it where I'm really addicted to the story, and I've just been thrashing out kind of a new idea for something new to work on while I'm waiting for feedback on that other book. And so I'll get really excited about something and I'll have a big burst when I'll write. Generally I have to write in the evenings because of circumstance, so I'll just grab an hour and a half in the evening and write as much as I can. But I don't kind of put too much pressure on myself because I don't want to. This is what I love. I love doing it, and I never want it to be a chore and think, oh, right, the baby's in bed now, I have to do something. I have to write a bit. If I'm not feeling it at night, I'm like, well, I'm just going to watch that new Dracula film on TV instead. Or watch Bridgerton, that's coming up. I'll take some time out to do that. So yeah, just whenever, if I'm not feeling it, I won't write, but other than that, I try and make myself do a little bit.
That's really good. I love the idea that you were like, I had a break of a week. To anyone else, it's like, that's not very long, really.
That's for me, and it's quite funny now that I've got an agent. It's really nice to have someone to be like, I have all these ideas, which one should I write next? Because otherwise, after I'd finished that manuscript, usually I'm like, right, next. The next day I'm like, let's do this. But you know, I sent all my ideas to her and she mulled it over. She was like, I think these couple have legs, so yeah, it's nice to have a bit of guidance as well.
Are there any particular authors that have influenced your work, do you think?
So many. As with most writers, you know, I'm a reader first. I think Anne Rice is probably one of my biggest influences. You know, I've always loved her work. I was a proper vampire girl when I was a teenager, and that's kind of really carried on with me into later life. But these days, you know, I love Holly Black. I love her, especially the Cruel Prince trilogy. I think they're just amazing and so sharp. I love her use of dialogue and how every word on her page is just so thought out and vital. I just love that sharpness in her stories and her dialogue and her characters, just everything. On the contrast to that, I also really love Rachel Griffin. If you've ever read Bring Me Your Midnight and Wild is the Witch, they're just really gorgeous, nature-based magic. And her stories are so heartbreaking. Like, I just aspire to that level of heartbreak. And and another completely different one, Crystal Sutherland. I love Crystal Sutherland's work. Like, the Invocations and House of Hollow are so eerie and beautiful. And I love the, like, creepy, beautiful writing. I just think that's really amazing. And of course, some of my favourites are The Night Circus and 100 Years of Solitude. Just really beautiful magical realism and just so different and dreamlike. But loads. There's always something adding to that list. You know, I read Rose in Chains last year, and that just blew me away, and I know that started its life as Hermione fan fiction, so yeah, just a bit of everything is, as long as it's got, generally fantasy and romance are my bag, so yeah, I think it's hard not to be influenced by all such great things that are out there in the world.
Yeah, no, true. And I think everything you read, sometimes as well, you can get influenced, can't you, without even consciously thinking about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just things that I've watched as well. I'm like a bit of a TV film person. This latest book that I've got on submission is Romeo and Juliet, massively inspired by the Baz Luhrmann film.
I love that film.
So he was lovely. Leonardo DiCaprio in that film. It's just he's just at his peak. So I loved that. And I realised again when I was talking to my agent that I'd written this book after being in like my Maxton Hall era. So massive James Beaufort influences to that character, like some real daddy issues. So that was fun. So I think just everywhere, it's the people that you meet, the films that you see, the books that you read, just you can't help but soak it all up, can you?
Yeah. I mean, everyone's talking at the moment about the Wuthering Heights film. Are you planning to go and see that?
Yeah, I do want to see it. It's always fun to see like interpretations of things. I know it's not going to be a faithful adaptation of Bronte, but sometimes, you just have to appreciate things for what they are and that it's not meant to be. I mean, it's marketed as the greatest love story ever told, which obviously anyone that's read the book knows it's not a love story. So obviously, it's something else. It's not really Wuthering Heights, but apparently the soundtrack's really good and I love a good soundtrack in a film. And I mean, if we can't appreciate anything else, we'll at least appreciate Margot Robbie, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, and Jacob Elordi.
And him. He's a very tall gent, isn't he?
So when I did the premiere for Frankenstein, he's huge. He's like 6 foot something. Is he like 6'7" or something crazy? He looks huge compared to everybody else.
Well, there you go.
So I think I first came across you on social media, and I can see that like you use it quite a lot to promote your books and talk a little bit about your writing process, both TikTok and Instagram. Do you think it's important nowadays for authors to have a social media platform?
Yeah, for sure. I think, it is really important because, as where a lot of your audience is, especially when you're writing in romantic fantasy, and it's so powerful. Like we all know the stories of like book talk blowing up and and some very self-published books that have become so huge that they've got picked up and got trad deals and we all hear people say if you don't have a big social media following that's what agents are looking for. It is really important and it's a really good way of connecting to readers, which is just obviously vital if you're going to do anything, whether you're traditionally published or self-published. And I've met some really, like yourself, met some incredible people through social media. I can't claim, I'm definitely not a viral sensation, as well most people will not be a viral sensation. So it's really important, and it's really important to find your community. Also, I think it's really important to stay true to like your voice and to not overthink it. And and for it to be the be all and end all. There's a lot of discourse about how you won't get a trad deal these days if you don't have a huge social media following, and obviously while that helps, it's just not impossible to get a trad deal without I don't have a big social media following, and I haven't got a publishing deal yet, but I managed to snag myself an agent. And I think, really when it comes to getting an agent, if that's what a route that people want to go down, is there's so much luck involved. So much luck, and so I was saying a lot of it's perseverance, a little bit of talent, and obviously it does help if you've written a really beautiful, amazing book and that you've got a great hook. But I'm not so naive to think that my book's just like more amazing than the next one. It just so happened to be the thing that she was looking for at the right time. So, when I spoke to my now agent, she was like, I've been looking for a mermaid story and, and this one caught my attention. And so, it was the right book at the right time with the right agent and I got lucky. So many factors. So, yes, but social media, going back to your point, is really important. But I think it's important that you just have a bit of fun with it. You stay true to your voice. You don't overthink it. If you're not natural with it, don't start thinking, oh my God, I've got to post 3 times a day. I've got to get in front of the camera. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. It's just meant to be a fun place for you to share your work. So just try and stick to that.
I often think like social media is really good for building community as well. Like say we met on social and just started chatting and then have met in real life. And also just the whole like fandoms I think are really interesting on social. It'll be really interesting to see how your socials grow a little bit once your book comes out as well.
I've been thinking that. I'm like, what will it do for that? Is it going to have a massive impact? Depending on, and I suppose it depends on so many things. So obviously I've got my agent who is, amazing. And the good thing about having an agent is that they will, it's someone in your corner that's going to, fight to make your book better, then fight for, for your book to be heard in rooms. But that still doesn't mean, it's going to be with a huge publishing house or anything like that. Anything can happen, and when it goes on submission, it's all new, this part. So it's going to be a really interesting journey, whether that, how that having that that support, how that impacts that side, that social media side of it. Because some of the people that I've met on social media, like in terms of like on Book Talk, and some of the girls that have really like supported my work and championed me and always trying to promote like indie authors like I am at the moment. So it'll be really interesting to see how that grows as well. But I hope that, I know that those girls will be really happy for me as well, and that, I would always really thank them for their support while I was, an indie author and hopefully moving into that more traditional world. But we'll see.
What are you doing, Link? You gonna jump up? Come and say hello. Oh, look at this, Kerry. Say hello, Kerry.
Hello, kitty. Oh, you're so cute.
He's like, oh God, what to do?
He's so gorgeous.
You're gonna get down. Good boy. He's licking himself now as if to go, please do not touch me again. He might run away now, hopefully. So what is it in particular about romantic fantasy that drew you to it?
Well, I suppose because it's primarily what I read. I love reading romantic fantasy. I love beautiful heartbreak, as Holly Black once said. I think what's really beautiful about romantic fantasy, obviously with fantasy, you can like lose yourself in a different world. I love that like anything's possible, and I really love the idea of our world with fantasy worlds like woven underneath it, and I really love that possibility that magic is there underneath the everyday. But I think with romance, as we talked about earlier about that reader expectation, is that no matter how dark it gets, no matter that emotional devastation in the middle, is that with romance you know that it's going to end on a happy note, it's going to have that happy ending, no matter the trauma that it takes to get there. And I think knowing that something's going to turn out okay is, really important, especially in dark times like we're living in. I love reading about something where you go through the trauma and you're going to laugh, you're going to cry, but you know that it's going to be okay in the end.
It's a really lovely answer. If anyone's listening or watching and wants to come and meet both me and Kerry on our Romantasy Fantasy Retreat Day at Warwick Castle, it's happening on Saturday the 14th of March. You can book through a website. I'll pop a link down in the description, and we can't wait to meet you all there and work with you and help you set you off on your own writing journeys. Thanks a lot, Kerry. Have a good evening.